Thank you for joining our event today for Disability and Chosen Family. This is an event hosted by the Olmstead Implementation Office, and we have invited the Arc Minnesota and CloseKnit to join our presentation today to share a little bit about what it means, what chosen family means, and how that intersects with disability. And so we can advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a few notes for today to get us started. For accessibility, we do have ASL and CART available today. Our ASL interpreters should be spotlighted. You can also pin them to make sure that you are able to have them accessible to you during the presentation. And then we do have CART captioning. You can access CART by clicking the closed captions CC button at the bottom of your screen so that you can view those captions. I am also putting the link to closed captioning in the chat. There it is for everyone. And as far as other accessibility, use the space as you need, as you prefer. You can communicate through your body, your voice, or any other methods. Feel free to close your eyes and draw or doodle, fidget, write, take notes, whatever you need. I know I probably will be knitting as I listen along to help me focus. Feel free, we will have time for Q&A at the end of this presentation. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can send them to everyone or you can direct them to me, Chloe, and I'll make sure that we ask our presenters those questions at the end of their presentation. One thing about chat is please do not share any personal contact information, just to make sure that everyone is staying safe and secure during this presentation. And then finally, the event is being recorded, and we will be sharing that recording with you next week so that you can have access to it. It will also be on our website. So you can refer back to it, share it. I know sometimes you want to listen now, take notes later. And so we will be sharing that through email, through our social media, through our website next week. And to kick us off today, our two presenters are Charlie and Courtney. And so Charlie Barba Cook is the Deputy Director for CloseKnit. Charlie's passion for uplifting underserved and underrepresented communities spans many fields. For nearly 20 years, Charlie worked in the field of disability, and she has also been a community organizer for decades and across many cities. Because she knows firsthand the toll of houselessness, that the toll of houselessness can take on both the youth and their hosts, Charlie is passionate about the mission of CloseKnit to change system narratives that are currently preventing investment in chosen family arrangements in a way that alleviates racial disparities in housing throughout the process. Then we have Courtney Cresson with us today from the Arc Minnesota. Courtney is a licensed social worker and is currently the Director of Individual Advocacy and Evaluation with the Arc Minnesota. Courtney leads the ARC's help desk and individual advocacy work, and she supports people who have disabilities and their trusted supporters in navigating formal and informal disability supports. Courtney has experience as a coach, group facilitator, and as a person-centered planner. And Courtney will be kicking off our presentation today to tell us more about the ARC. So Courtney, I will hand it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chloe. Like Chloe said, I work at the Arc Minnesota. I use she and her pronouns, and right now I'm in my home office, so you'll see my shelf behind me, and I am wearing a teal shirt. The Arc Minnesota is a statewide nonprofit organization. We promote and protect the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD for short. You might hear me use that acronym today. We believe that you belong in a world that welcomes you, a world where all people with IDD are valued, respected, and thriving. For over 75 years, we've worked to provide advocacy and information for people with IDD and their trusted supporters. We believe people who have disabilities are strong, powerful, capable, and resilient, and can use that power to change systems and society. We believe communities should be centered in justice and all people should have belonging and freedom. We have many programs and services to help accomplish that, but today I'm just going to highlight a few of them that are relevant to our presentation. If you want to go to the next slide. Before I dive into some of those programs, I wanted to let you know where we work. So we have 5 main regions across the state, and these are hubs where we have staff that work in the region and know the area. That's Greater Twin Cities, Mid-State area by St. Cloud, West Central by Moorhead area, Southeast around Rochester, and Southwest Mankato, Marshall area. There's information on the slide for the Facebook group for each of those regions. So if you are in one of those, feel free to check out anything local. Go to the next slide. Thank you. One of our program areas is public policy. The ARC works for policy solutions that create positive systems and social change for Minnesotans with IDD. We are nonpartisan in our work. We partner with many individuals and organizations to make those changes. Some of the things that we're working on that are relevant to today's conversation are reforming medical assistance programs, increasing affordable, accessible housing options, addressing inflexibilities for in-home services and supports, and improving rates for critical in-home services. So those are some of our statewide initiatives right now. We do also work on federal policy and general systems and social change. We've been a part of service transformation efforts within the county system and do grassroots advocacy. On the slide is a link to our 2023 legislative agenda for anyone who is interested in learning more. Next slide is housing. So we have several housing programs across the state where housing coordinators can help people find inclusive, accessible, and affordable housing. They include housing access services, housing stabilization services, and transitional services. We also have a crisis housing assistance program, which helps provide short-term housing to people with a serious mental illness who are receiving mental health or substance use treatments. So there is more information on our website about that program, but if that sounds like something you are wanting help with finding housing, feel free to reach out to us. The last program area I'm going to talk about today is individual advocacy. We have a statewide help desk that you can call at 1-866-797-1122. And it provides information and referral, online tools and resources, one-to-one support and systems navigation, and individual and group coaching. The help desk staff can help with many disability-related questions like medical assistance or county services. They generally will talk with you about your situation, help you develop or figure out your goals, go over your options, and then make a plan for moving forward. We can often connect people with other resources within the ARC, like with our housing team that I mentioned, or outside of the ARC, maybe another organization like CloseKnit. In regards to our individual and group coaching, this is something where advocates can meet with you over Zoom, and we might do some more in-depth problem solving, help you evaluate pros and cons, and explain the options that you have both in and out of the service system, making sure that you know the full range of things that you have to choose from. I am going to turn it over to Charlie. If anybody has any questions about the ARC, feel free to put them in the chat. We can make sure we answer those at some point, but I'll turn it over to Charlie for now.
Thanks, Courtney. My name is Charlie Barba Cook. As I said before, I'm the Deputy Director of CloseKnit. I use she, her pronouns, and today I'm wearing a black shirt with yellow writing that says WFA Strong, and behind me you'll see my white bookshelf and record player, and on the other side of me is a rack with some family photos. But to get started, I'll just talk a little bit about CloseKnit, what we do, why we're relevant to this conversation, and essentially the mission of CloseKnit is to catalyze system change and bring narrative change to how we're handling and how we're preventing homelessness for youth. What we really want to address is permanent connections. How do we stabilize permanent connections for youth? And we believe strongly that every youth is already loved, and that, you know, the unfortunate fact is that a lot of the people that love the youth in our lives who are facing homelessness don't have the resources needed to help stabilize them. So if you could go to the next slide, please. We try to impact, we try to minimize, we don't ever really like to say that we're working to end homelessness. That's not necessarily a realistic goal for us. We want to prevent youth homelessness as much as we can and minimize it as much as we can. We understand that that's a big feat in itself. So that's kind of where we're starting. And the way we do that is through these kind of 4 buckets of work. And what we'll talk a little bit more in depth about are the legal guides. So I won't talk a lot about that right now, but it's resources for people in our community to use that are either youth facing homelessness, or they're hosts of those youth, that chosen family of the youth. So what else we do is expand current programming. So we work really hard to create partnerships with community organizations who do direct services, direct support for youth. We do not do direct support ourselves or direct services ourselves at CloseKnit. So what we like to do is go in with partners in the community who have like drop-in centers or have shelters, and train staff on how to have conversations that might enlighten the youth to figure out who in their lives could potentially be a stable, permanent connection for them, rather than kind of the shelter being their only option. So talk a little bit more about that in a bit also. We also work really hard to connect with property owners and incentivize them to allow informal chosen family hosting arrangements. We do that with, we've shaped rental agreement options, and we have mediation services that we can connect people to hosts and their property owners. And then we also encourage programs like Beyond Backgrounds to include chosen family hosting arrangements. So for example, that program might offer mediation services, but also offer the property owner a $2,000 deposit, sort of ensuring that youth isn't there to disrupt property, and that youth really is just there to live. So it incentivizes the property owner by minimizing the risk they take by allowing that relationship to continue. And then we also, I think narrative change is one of the bigger buckets, and that's having a lot of conversations in the community with people about chosen family hosting arrangements. So I do want to talk a little bit about what exactly is chosen family, right? We hear this term and it's not always familiar, but chosen family is it's an individual related by blood or affinity whose existing close association to the youth or young adult to a person fulfills the need of a familial relationship. So that's a lot of words to basically say, who is it in your life that loves you, right? And who's taking care of you, and who's supporting you as a human being. So we all have chosen family. Some of us call them friends, some of us call them family. But in the case, as it relates to the work that we do, chosen family is, who's that person you can count on. And so myself having, my mom kicked me out when I was 15, so I was living on the streets, and a lot of the time that I was out there, I kind of thought of myself as on my own. But the fact is that I actually did have people in my life who were willing to let me sleep on their couch, who were, willing to feed me a meal and or help me find a job so I could take care of myself. And those people were my chosen family. And so that's an example of kind of what we're talking about here. Let's see. And we'll go to the next slide. So one of the things I think I'm the most proud of with CloseKnit is that we've come up with all of these legal guides, and we will look at them a little bit more in depth in another training. Today, we're really just going to talk about the Disability Services Guide, but we put together these tools and resources that can provide youth and hosts with current information about how they can stabilize their situation. So, sometimes a renter might host a youth and they're sleeping on the couch, and their property owner says, on their lease agreement, they can only have somebody stay for 2 weeks maximum for the year. And so a lot of the times they have to choose between getting evicted and keeping that youth there, or saying, hey, you got to go, right? And so we want to help prevent that, unfortunate situation where they have to make a choice between that kid, forcing that kid back out on the street and risking their own home. So providing the host with quality information, empowering hosts and the youth to make decisions that are really fitting for themselves, and just tools to refer them to direct service providers who might be able to help with those situations. And if we go to the next slide, we can see all of the different documents that we put together that you'll be able to find on our website. Shared expectations agreement is a tool that renters and just youth and hosts can use together in there to make sure that they're on the same page in their living situation. And then we have legal guides, renter or guest legal guide for homeowners, which is different from people who are renter hosts. So there's 2 different guides there with information that's more relevant to one or the other. If you have a minor youth in your life who is facing homelessness, there's a guide more specific to that, because that's very different from a youth who's between 18 and 24. And then we have legal system impacted guides. So if there's, legal system involvement somehow, there's information on that guide. And then staying under the radar or coming above board. We understand that there's risk in sort of coming out, if you will, about your hosting situation sometimes. And so this document will help you decide what you might need to do in order for it to be safe to kind of come above board. The Disability Services Legal Guide is probably our most cumbersome. It's huge. It's huge, and it's got a lot of information. And so Courtney is going to help me talk through that. If we go to the next slide, we can show you. So the Disability Services Guide does answer some questions, like what are the disability waivers, what services can the waivers provide, but what if the person with a disability does not qualify for a waiver, and how does informal hosting affect disability benefits? We put the link to the Chosen Family Justice website, so we can click on that now and check out where our guides live on our website. And the reason this is relevant is we have a disability services legal guide, right? But having a disability does not mean that any of those other things are not possible for you. So you can access all of the other information that we have that might be relevant to you. Maybe, you don't want to approach your situation, directly or prioritizing the fact that you have a disability. Maybe there's something that's much more relevant. Maybe there's a minor involved or something like that. So the Disability Services Legal Guide, though, is a guide that's going to help us talk through all of the possible situations specifically related to having a disability as either a host or a youth. So let's go ahead and go to that guide. Oh, we're here already. Okay. So the first page is just a little bit of an intro. And if we scroll down to the second page, we have our table of contents here. And you should be able to just click on different sections to get to where you need to go. For starters, I definitely would go to the definitions and abbreviations page. There's a lot of terminology we use throughout the guide, and we tried our best to make it understandable. But obviously, we are super open and excited about any feedback that you all have. If you check this guide out and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right, or that doesn't make sense, we'd love to get your feedback. These are live documents that we're continuously updating and working to improve, because we really just want them to be useful for you. So, of course, just want to start with that. Let's see, definitions, abbreviations, we got general considerations, just things to think about generally. And then we go into what the disability waivers are, what services the waivers provide. So questions we talked about earlier. What is roommate sharing while on a waiver? What if you don't qualify for a waiver? And then, how is informal hosting going to affect your benefits? I think that one of the bigger differences between chosen family and other sort of placement type situations are that it's informal. What we're talking about is, how do we stabilize informal hosting arrangements and not need to sort of go through an entire system. And the fact is that a lot of the systems that we operate in for social services, they carry a form of racism, they carry a lot of judgment, they carry a lot of discrimination in general, and they're not always understanding of and welcoming to BIPOC communities and queer communities. So I know myself as a foster provider, it's definitely a challenge and different when I'm working with my white social workers versus BIPOC social workers, right? And we're also very queer in my household. So we have on our license that we say, you have to tell the youth that we foster 15 and over. So you have to tell the young person that we are super, super gay. Glitter kind of spouts out from our house every day. And so the kid has to either really be comfortable in that situation, or maybe be queer themselves. So we're really intentional about how we talk about things, but not everybody is comfortable having that conversation with 5 different social workers. So the systems in place aren't always super supportive of BIPOC communities and queer communities, et cetera. So informal supports might be the better way to go. But let's see. Courtney, did you want to jump in and talk specifically about?
Yes, absolutely. So I just want to frame things a little bit. So Charlie, you and some other staff at CloseKnit have just been amazing in shifting mindset from a informal hosting arrangement being viewed as only a temporary solution where we're couch hopping and there's like some shame around it, versus something that could be a permanent choice and something that we want to stabilize through some of these programs. It's more of that community mindset versus our individualized mindset. And it's just been a really important shift for me. And so some of the things that I'm going to talk about today may or may not apply to you, but these are ways to make things more permanent, where some of these programs are going to take a while to apply for if you don't already have them. It could be, months before you get them. But when you do, it can help stabilize whatever living situation you're in. So if you want to scroll down a little bit, I'm going to talk about a few different things, different programs, and how they kind of relate. So we do have these definitions here, and we can scroll past those for now. If you are someone that likes to read along with us and you want to open up this link, do feel free. I won't be sad if you're not looking at me. If you want to follow along, feel free to do that for yourself. But in general, when we're looking at different paid programs that can help stabilize these informal hosting arrangements, you're going to be looking at things that are either income-based or disability-based, or both. There's kind of that combination. So there are folks who have disabilities that don't have it maybe formalized, but they still meet income requirements. So if you meet that income requirement, you're going to be able to access things with a few less barriers, but it's also going to be less overall support that you're going to get. So it just kind of depends on where you're at. Maybe you don't have the time or resources right now to go and get a formal diagnosis, but you're meeting income requirements. Or maybe you have the formal diagnosis, but you just don't have that capacity to go through and go through Social Security and get your disability certified, or through our state medical review team. So just want to say that there are different options depending on your particular situation. And this is not for everybody. So not everybody is going to qualify. These are programs that you need to apply for, and you might not qualify. So I want to be upfront about that it may not work for everybody. But for those that do qualify and are interested, we're going to give some information. There is some contact information here for the Arc Minnesota's Help Desk, and then also Disability Hub. So if you want to talk about any of the specific programs that I mentioned today, feel free to call me at the Arc or to call Disability Hub, and we can help you out. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. So waivers are one of the programs that will pay for some of the most things. So you'll hear them called Home and Community-Based Services Waivers, or HCBS. And essentially they're for folks who have that diagnosed disability. They've gone through the process of certifying that disability through Social Security or through the state medical review team. You might hear the term SMART. That stands for State Medical Review Team. So they've gone through that process, and they also meet income requirements. It may depend on your age. Like Charlie mentioned, things can be different if you're a minor versus an adult, but they've gone through that process, met the criteria. They also qualify for medical assistance and have applied for that program, and it's called disability-based MA. There are also different types of disability-based MA. There's many different variations of medical assistance, or MA. You also might hear it called Medicaid. So just wanting to mention all of these different terms that you might hear so that it's a little bit more familiar the next time you hear it, just within context. So medical assistance and Medicaid, same thing. That's just what we call our Medicaid program in Minnesota. But anyway, there are many different ways to qualify for it. And depending on how you qualify, there are different programs that medical assistance can then pay for. So I'm not going to get too far into any of the other specific programs, but if you are needing health insurance in general, medical assistance is first and foremost health insurance, but then also can pay for some of these other things. So if you're needing that and want to know more about it, reach out. Waivers, once we have that medical assistance, the right kind, disability-based, and we've gone through Social Security or SMART, we can apply for a waiver. Now, two of the main ones that a youth with a disability are going to access are the CADI waiver, or Community Access for Disability Inclusion, or the Developmental Disabilities waiver. There are other waivers, but these tend to be the most common for folks in this situation. So those are the two that we're going to highlight, but these are not the only two options. So to apply for this, you would do what's called a Min Choices assessment through your county. You would call them up, you would say, I want to be assessed to see if I qualify for a waiver, and then they would go through a long assessment with you to see if you would qualify for this. And then if you qualify, you will be assigned a case manager who will help figure out which programs underneath that waiver you can qualify for. You will also hear something called CDCS, Consumer Directed Community Supports. And this is essentially a different way to use those waiver dollars that's a little less traditional and tends to be more flexible. It gives recipients more power over the services, staff, budget that they get. And it tends to just be a much more flexible option that could be a really good option for someone in an informal hosting arrangement. Scroll down. So now that you kind of know what those waivers are, you're probably wondering, okay, but now, like, what specific programs are they actually going to do? What can it do in my day-to-day life? So these are some of the specifics that we pulled out that would apply most often in an informal hosting arrangement. Again, there may be other ones that would apply to your situation that are a little bit more nuanced, but one of them is individualized home supports, and it will pay for someone to support the person who qualified for the waiver. So that could be the youth or the adult that they're living with. Either way, it could go. And it's to support them in accessing their community. General health, safety, wellness, household management, adaptive living skills, those sorts of things is what it's going to cover. Personal care assistance is one where it has very specific criteria of different things that you might need access or you might need help to access, like eating, dressing, bathing, grooming, those sorts of things. And you will be approved for a very specific amount of hours in any given day. And then that's the amount that someone could provide. Homemaking is like housekeeping. That's a synonym. It's just what the waiver service is called, is homemaking. So if someone needs support to be able to keep their living arrangement clean, if they're not able to do that due to a disability, you could be paid to provide that support. And then caregiver living expenses are one of the ones that I think will be most relevant to a lot of folks. So if there's an unrelated caregiver, so that chosen family member, you live in the same place, you can qualify to have some of those living expenses covered if you are also supporting the person with some of those daily care needs or whatever support that they need. There are different criteria and everything for applying, as I've mentioned a few times now, but this can be a really good way to help stabilize that and get some income for the person providing the support. Now, I do want to say for these services and a few of the other ones, the Minnesota Department of Human Services is in the process of something called Waiver Reimagine, which means they're switching up how the waivers are structured. So these are terms that may be going away. They may be switching with a different program. The services that you can get will still be the same. They just may be called something different. So if you're applying next year or in 2 years and you're looking for this specific term, it may be called something else. But your assessment, your case manager will be able to direct you to whatever particular program it is. Let's scroll down a little bit. Oh yeah, Charlie.
Before we scroll down, actually, I wanna really highlight. So why is this relevant to chosen family hosting arrangements? Right, we're talking about disability services and waivers and all this. You know, maybe you all already know that. There's probably a lot of people listening that are like, yes, we're familiar with the waiver. Why does this matter? If you are a youth or a host, and you have a disability that does qualify for the waiver services, one of you could be providing this service as a way of bringing in that resource for that informal hosting arrangement, right? So maybe the placement of or that living situation isn't formal, but maybe you could be the PCA for your host and be bringing in income that way. Or, maybe you're already doing those things for the person. Maybe you're already doing homemaking for that person, but you could be stabilizing your situation more by bringing in income as the homemaker. I know Courtney touched on the caregiver living expenses. That one feels the most obvious, but it as an IHS worker, you could already be doing a lot of those things as a housemate with the person that you're either hosting or the host, either hosting or being hosted by. So really think about, like, if you meet people who are in a situation where there's an informal hosting situation, there's chosen family hosting situation, and they don't have resources, this could be a way of bringing resources to that family. So just keep that in mind. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, scrolling down a little bit more. So this page is specific about roommate sharing. Life sharing is something that waivers can help pay for. It's a relationship-based living arrangement, and this is for adults, so 18 plus, so this would not apply to minors. But it can either be for a relationship that you've already made, or if you're looking for someone to live with and you're either a person with a disability who's looking for those supports, or you're someone without a disability who is looking to live with someone and support them. This is a way where you can do, they call it roommate matching. But again, they also help if you already do know someone. And it's essentially staff who know how this works and will help you develop that relationship. They'll help you meet somebody who has shared interests, like Charlie was talking about. Those shared interests are so important so that we actually match up really good. And it's something that I won't dive too far into just because it's kind of its own beast to tackle. But it is a way, if you're looking for that type of support, that a waiver can cover. Roomie is also an option for roommate matching, and those two definitely work in conjunction with each other at times. But it's another way to do a roommate match. Let's scroll down. Okay, I've been talking a lot about those waivers that require you to go through Social Security or the state medical review team, and there's more layers and applications for those. But if you don't want to go through that, or maybe you don't qualify, maybe you were denied Social Security and you applied, you were denied, and you're here. If you qualify for medical assistance, just income-based medical assistance, you can still do an assessment for personal care assistance, and you can still get those PCA hours. Now, like I said before, it's not going to be as many supports or as much income that someone could make from being a PCA as it would be for some of the other programs, but it is something, and it can definitely help stabilize, especially because there's less barriers to get to it, and so it's something that can be set up faster. There's also something called the Consumer Support Grant, and this is one of those things that's changing. You'll hear Community First Services and Supports, or CFSS. That's what this is changing to, but essentially it's a more flexible way to use any hours that you qualify for. So let's say you qualify for 3 hours a day of personal care assistance. You could convert that into essentially just a grant of a pool of money that you can spend on PCA or on other things. Maybe you need some equipment or something to make your house more accessible that you're living in. So that's something that you would be assigned, again, a case manager to help you figure out how to write those things into the plan. But there are two really, really good options if you either don't qualify for a waiver or you just don't have the ability to apply right now because of your situation. There are different criteria for who can be a PCA, depending on if you're related or not. I won't dive too far into those, though, because it really depends on a specific situation. So we can scooch down to the next slide. Okay. So one of the big questions is, how does informal hosting affect disability benefits? Sometimes folks could be worried about losing their benefits if their living situation changes. So one of the things, and this is a little bit farther down, but Social Security has something that they will do if you're living with someone and not paying rent, or your like fair share of that rent, you will actually have your Social Security decreased, because they're saying, well, your Social Security is supposed to be spent on rent, but you're not spending it on rent, so you don't need that money, is essentially what the idea is. So one of the things that you want to do if you do have Social Security is make sure that you are paying your fair share of rent. You'll want to have some sort of rental agreement, and there are some wonderful CloseKnit resources about pros and cons of doing a renter agreement that you can check out. But this is one of the main things that you can do to make sure you don't get your Social Security decreased because of that informal hosting arrangement. Let's scroll down. Those are just very specific about those programs. Right. Just to talk a little bit more about minors versus adults, the programs are going to be a little bit easier if someone is an adult who's their own guardian to access, but not impossible if someone is a minor. It's something that you would really want to talk through the situation with a professional who knows what's going on. They know the service system. Call Arc, call Disability Hub, call your county, and talk through that so that you can provide that support and make sure that you're doing it in a legal kind of way. Okay. I think that's the extent of the things I wanted to cover about those specific programs. Charlie, did you have anything else to talk about in regards to this guide?
I did want to just highlight the STAY program can be really helpful if you have a youth in your life who was in the foster system or is in the foster system and is what a lot of people say, like graduating, they turn 18 and what happens then, right? The STAY program is really helpful for if you have a youth in your life who you're wanting to host more permanently. It is a little more formal than some of the other things. So I wanted to kind of give that little spiel about the STAY program, but it is really helpful for both everybody involved, and it does include services, not just finances. So it does help that youth really build that skill of becoming independent. But then if you're able to be a host for them during that time and be their chosen family, that's really what we're after here, is permanent connection. So we don't want what happens when folks are in shelters or in programs. Like, yes, those programs are fantastic and the shelters are fantastic and we need those too. And what happens when they leave, and where are the permanent connections, and where's the focus on permanent connections? So that I think is where the STAY program, even though it's formal, is actually pretty cool and can help us even stabilize permanent connection beyond the system. So that's, yeah. I think anything but beyond that, if we just scroll through so we can kind of see a little bit of, I think the rest of the guide is really just kind of redirecting you to some of our other guides and services. So I think we're good for questions now if people have questions. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm muted. Thank you both, Charlie and Courtney, for that great information. Very helpful. And I did drop the link to the Disability Services Guide in the chat for anyone who wants to bookmark that. But we will also be sending out this full presentation and these links in an email to everyone who registered for the event today. And so you will get those resources soon. And now we do have a few questions. If you have any further questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can chat myself, Chloe, Courtney, or Charlie, or you can post them for everyone to see, whatever you're most comfortable with. And one question that I did have was, what is the difference between own home and chosen family? Own home being capitalized, making me think it is a service.
Charlie, do you want me to take that one, or do you?
Yeah, you could start since it seems like that, but I'll maybe add a little bit after.
Okay, sounds good. So we will often hear the term own home used when someone is either renting or owning their own home versus a provider controlled home, like a group home is the provider, the person who is, or the entity, the company that is doing all of the supports for someone is owning it. They're providing the sports, all of that. Now, an informal hosting arrangement like this, let's say Charlie owns a house and I decide to live with Charlie, and Charlie's going to provide some supports as like a PCA to me. That would still typically be like an own home, since it's a very informal, like we're friends, we're a friend supporting a friend. Typically, when we're thinking about provider owned, it's like a company that's owning that. So they're very similar. You could, be in an own home and live with chosen family, or it could be in an own home and just like live by yourself.
Yeah, just to add to clarifying, I know chosen family can be a little vague or feel a little vague, but I want to bring it. Chloe, people are able to respond to me, right? If I ask, okay. So I want to ask if anybody's willing and brave enough to explain a time, or be open about a time that maybe they hosted or witnessed their family hosting or were hosted by someone. And I'll just start with an example, but I'd love to hear more people give examples of times that they've experienced. I know that when my mom, single mom of 4 kids, got evicted, we got evicted at one point. We showed up, mom, bags, and 4 kids in tow to her sister's house. So my aunt informally hosted us for a period of time, right? And that would be a chosen family hosting arrangement, right? So my aunt wouldn't typically be, responsible for my mom and her 4 kids, right? But she, as chosen family, hosted us in that tough situation we were in. So that's an example. Does anybody have any examples of chosen family hosting arrangements they've experienced in their lives?
Feel free to drop anything in the chat, or you can come off mute if you want to. I know my family was the chosen family for one of my sister's friends after high school when she had unstable housing and needed a place to live. So she lived with my parents and myself for a year or so while she got back on her feet and got a job.
That's a great example, Chloe. And if anybody else has other examples they want to share, it happens all the time and every day and in a lot of spaces. And it's you are doing it out of your own home, whether you're renting or buying. So, and we wanted to address that. It wasn't specific to disability program that question came out of. But we are doing it all the time, and it really is. This isn't like a breakthrough or innovative approach to doing things. We're trying to stabilize people where they're at, and the fact is that for centuries, since life existed, we've been doing this, taking care of each other, community, and we're just trying to bring it back to community. So, anyway, other questions?
Yeah. Who exactly does CloseKnit serve, Charlie? Like, is this? It's not specific to people with disabilities, correct?
Yes, correct. So we don't serve people. We don't I wouldn't even really say we serve anyone directly or specifically. CloseKnit's mission is really around narrative change, narrative shifting. So we do a lot of like legislative and policy advocacy. We have a lot of conversations with people who are providing direct services to sort of bring a new way, a shifted way of addressing youth homelessness. The fact is that we have shelters, and the shelters are great, right? Programs for youth facing homelessness, they're fantastic. We need all of the different avenues of addressing youth homelessness, and it will greatly benefit us to change the narrative and say, hey, you're already loved where you're at. We don't necessarily need to remove you from the community, put you in a formal program, and put you on a track toward independent living, right? Like that's not necessarily the answer. It's very possible that well, like your friend Chloe, your friend that stayed there for a year with your family, if she didn't have you to stay with, that would have been, she potentially would have been homeless, right? And to prevent that, it was a very simple, your family had the resources to host her. And BIPOC families and the community don't often have the resources to feed an extra mouth and to be a parent to another person, where you're trying to teach them that how to be a housemaid and how to clean up and how to go to school and how to have a job and how to be a human, the things that our family and friends teach us every day, right? So we aren't necessarily, we are not a direct service provider. We aren't necessarily serving anyone in particular. It's really just about bringing a new conversation to the space and offering another tool, which I know that at the panel conversation we're going to talk a little bit about circle maps. So you'll get to see one of the tools that we use when we're talking with providers about how to bring it back to community. So yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a
Not at all. And Nicola, did you have anything that you wanted to ask or contribute? Oh, we're not hearing you. Hold on. You are off mute. Let me see. Give you a moment to see if you can connect to.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. I had to change my settings. Yes, I just wanted to share a quick story of how I'm feeling about this. And it reminded me of someone's funeral I attended in June. And my friend's brother passed away. And some of you know who this person is. It's my friend used to work at Minnesota Housing. And her brother was an addict and went to a lot of meetings and had a lot of chosen family. And he lived with my friend. And so they took so many people in. And at his funeral, so many people came up and shared the impact he made on their life. I'd never met this person. I'm friends with my friend and it's her brother, so I wanted to support her. But I've never been to a funeral before where I was so impacted and moved by someone and their hospitality and just taking care of people for where they are. And they housed so many people for so many years. So I was able to witness all these people sharing at the funeral what it meant to them. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It has a huge impact to be able to host folks. And the fact that, we have a lot of people that are already radically loving the humans in their lives. And a lot of folks don't have the resources, right? They don't have the money, they don't have the space, they don't have the ability, the legal ability on their lease, et cetera, et cetera. So legislative change is where it's at for us from CloseKnit's end, but we also really want to be able to talk to folks that are doing that direct service and working with people to help stabilize. But that's so beautiful to hear how much impact just one person was able to make. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. One question that just came into me, and I'm not sure if maybe this is something that ARC could help with, but if someone wanted to host a youth with a disability in their home, but they needed help making it accessible, are there resources available for them to go to?
Yes, there are. So there are a few different organizations around that will help do like technology assessments or accessibility assessments to see what would be needed to make a home accessible. And there is some funding available as well, particularly through waivers, but sometimes counties will have other just grants where you don't maybe need a waiver, but there's some funding available for it. So it really does depend on the situation, depend on the area that you live in. So whoever that was is definitely welcome, or anybody is welcome to reach out to me and I can get you connected. The ARC wouldn't be able to like do an assessment or anything like that, a little bit beyond our purview, but I can definitely talk through your different options and get you pointed in the right direction.
Great, thank you. And real quick to Courtney, ARC, if you have a disability, but maybe not specifically an IDD, can you reach out to ARC for some support?
Yeah, you can still reach out. We are definitely specialized in programs more specific to folks who have IDD. So like we know a lot about the DD waiver, developmental disability waiver, and programs specific to folks who have those types of disabilities, but there is a lot of overlap. So if you call us and you don't have an IDD, I can still get you some resources and help you figure out what you might qualify for. There is also the Disability Hub that's on CloseKnit's guide, and they tend to have a little bit broader expertise area. So they may be a good call as well if you don't have a developmental disability, just because that's really where our expertise lies.
Great, thank you. And so looking at the time, we are out of time here. However, this was a great conversation today, and we will be, first we have information about ARC if you want to connect with ARC. And then on the next slide, we have information about CloseKnit if you want to connect with CloseKnit. And again, this slideshow will be sent out to everyone. So these links will be live. You can click them in the presentation. But then if you want to continue this conversation with us today, we are hosting a part 2 of this event in October on Wednesday, October 25th. And we will have a panel discussion on chosen family. And this panel includes both folks with lived experience as well as professionals in the field who will help share some resources. We will be talking about circle mapping and life sharing. And so come join us for part 2 of this event with ARC and CloseKnit. And so with that, just want to say thank you from everyone at the Olmstead Implementation Office. Thank you for joining us today for this great event. And thank you for Charlie and Courtney for sharing more about what you both do and all of the great resources and just spreading that, as someone said earlier, that radical loving to youth and folks facing homelessness. So thanks so much.
And thank you so much, Chloe, for hosting us. You're amazing.
Thank you, everybody. Catch you next time.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.